welcome. Today is May 9th, Wednesday, and we are recording a Positive Psychology News webinar. We are very excited because our guests today are the co-founders of Shift Positive 360. They are Jen Ostrich and Pete Berridge. We are extremely excited. Welcome everyone to our webinar. What is this webinar about? Why are we doing this webinar and why do we care? We at Positive Psychology News, we care about the research of positive psychology and how it can affect businesses, your personal life, relationships, everything. And this specific webinar is about creating lasting organizational change. Okay, I'm going to say a little bit about Jen, a little bit about Pete, and a little bit about Shift Positive 360, and then we're going to launch into questions. The format of this webinar is 40 minutes of me and Jen and Pete doing some questions, and then 20 minutes of the participants doing some questions. So here we go. First, Jen. This is Jen Ostrich. Jen spent 14 years of leading teams and clients in a very different sector from what we're usually used to in Positive Psychology News, in the advertising industry. But then Jen decided to follow one of her own core beliefs of leap and the net shall appear. And what she did is she went and got a coaching certificate from the Hudson Institute and has over 1,000 hours of coaching and is a PCC. And then she co-founded Shift Positive with Pete. And Jen, when you're not running your two businesses, you love eating your way through Austin, as I've learned, and spending time with your outrageously handsome dog, Coco. Is that so?
That is so, yes.
So what is he like, your Coco?
Well, he's currently outside doing a little hunting, but he's a very special animal. He's been treated as like a human for 5 years, like my human child. So he's adapted to be part human. He's really quite remarkable. He talks and responds. He knows about 100 words. Yeah.
You do the 3 positive questions with him. What's he grateful for each evening?
We do it each morning. Yes. And then we meditate.
Nice. I want to be your dog, Coco. This is fun. And Pete Berridge. Pete and I have known each other a long time. Pete, as many people on the call know, Pete is a MAP alum, a Master of Applied Positive Psychology from UPenn. Pete has a coaching certificate from Hudson, just like Jen, and he's got over 3,000 hours of coaching. That's a lot of hours for people who are not coaching. That's a lot of hours. He's been in the HR and coaching space for over 25 years, and he finally knew that there was a better way to do 360s and feedback, and that's why he and Jen co-founded Shift Positive 360. And Pete, in your spare time, you whittle. What is whittling?
What is whittling?
Yes.
Whittling is taking out a knife and a little piece of wood and carving a bird or a fish or whatever you'd like to whittle. So that's what I do.
What is something you especially like to whittle?
I carve shorebirds, I carve fish, and the name of my practice is Shorebird Coaching and Consulting for my coaching practice. And so at the close of my engagement with a client, I like to carve them a bird and give them a small shorebird.
Seriously? I never knew that.
Yeah.
How big is a shorebird that you give to a client?
He is about that big.
That's so nice. Okay, so I want to be Jen's dog.
and he whittled me a hummingbird, which are very meaningful to me. And unfortunately, it's in my bedroom, so I don't have it handy. But yeah, very special.
Yeah,
really neat. Okay, and a few words about the Shift Positive 360. What can we tell you about the Shift Positive 360? It's an incredible instrument. I am certified in it by Pete and Jen, and I suggest to everyone who is watching to go to the Portland or the Philadelphia certification, and we'll give you the dates and the times. Those are both later this year. I've done 360s, and I've created my own questions for years, probably for a decade. And this approach is a little different. It's a narrative 360, which means I, as the coach, would actually interview people that my client works with, the manager, the peers, the directs, and it's used by executives and by leadership coaches. It uses positive psychology, and it uses something that we'll be talking a lot, the people system. And what the people system does is it allows the people being interviewed to become allies for the leader being coached. And we'll get into what that specifically means. For me, just so you guys know, Jen and Pete, it really changed the game once I started using this and once I realized, whoa, what is happening and what is going on. So welcome everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First question. since we're talking about people and being coached and careers, what did each of you want to be when you grew up? When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? Let's start with Pete.
So for me, I wanted to be a fish hatchery operator.
Why?
Because I loved going to Backbone State Park as a kid, where they had a little fish hatchery of trout, and they would raise these trout and they'd release them in the stream. A guy would go along with a little John Deere tractor, and he'd throw fish into the stream, and we'd follow behind and we'd fish for those new trout. And I thought that had to be the coolest job in the world, just fishing, feeding fish, raising them, and having the opportunity to release them out into the wild. So that's what I was going to be. In the 7th grade, I actually took a little test. And back then you would answer a question, stick a pin through a hole in a card deck, and you would shake it out. And that would reduce the number of potential careers for you based on your interests. And I would do it again and again. And I kept answering the questions so that in the end, it actually came out fish hatchery operator. So that's what I'm going to be someday. Yeah.
I see. So your retirement plan is...
There's still time.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We're all having multiple careers these days. So.
Yeah.
And Jen, what did you want to be when you were a kid or a teenager?
So I feel like I kind of adopted the entrepreneurial spirit early on, at least in terms of my desires. My dad was a general contractor, and he had his own business that he ran the office out of our home. And so my mom supported him in doing that. I guess back then she was considered the secretary. So I would when I would have friends over or play and do make-believe, I'd play secretary, like we were running my company. And I think it's funny now looking back, because I think that's what I saw the role to be, because that's what I saw my mom. So kind of I saw me in the female role doing that. And then a little later in life, in my teen years, my aunt, who I was very close with, went back to school after she raised her 3 kids and went and became a lawyer. And then I was very fascinated by that. And in college, I debated law or advertising. And she said, there's a lot of us in the law, and you can major in advertising, see if you like it, but you're going to have to go to law school anyway. So why don't you just explore one and wind up in the other if that's what you choose? And I fell in love with advertising. So that was the path I took.
I love how you say that when you played secretary, your understanding as a kid was that the secretary ran everything.
Well, or just that, I don't know if I thought I just thought as a female that would be my part. Well, obviously I wasn't going to go out and hammer in the nails like Dad was.
Yeah.
Or at least I wasn't interested in that. But
basically running the business.
Oh yeah. And definitely any friends that came over to play, I was the boss.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
You basically played entrepreneur.
It's kind of crazy. Like, people are like, what are your hobbies? I'm like, I don't know. I would play work when I was 7. Sort of sad, but it got me to where I am.
And I actually, because usually I have one person on, but because I had the 2 of you on, and because I know you and I've been through your certificate program, I thought that I might also tell you what I wanted to be, which is kind of ironic given what we're doing. When I was in high school, now remember there was no internet back then, which is weird. There was radio, there was TV. I used to go to bed and put a little radio at my bed in the dark and listen to Larry King live at midnight, because I wanted to be an interviewer. I wanted to do talk radio and be an interviewer.
Wow, so here we are.
Exactly.
We're so happy we can support your childhood dreams, Sonia.
Yes. Larry Maiman. Very nice. Mm-hmm.
I want to go to a different direction before we go deep into why feedback and why 360 and how it should work. Can you tell me a little bit, you've both been in business a long time. Can you give me a little sense of some things that you think about as a mantra or a phrase you say to yourself or to clients regularly, just something that you find running through your head that you think about? And maybe we'll do this a little ping pong style. Maybe we'll do Jen and then Pete. So could we start with you, Jen? Just a mantra or a phrase that you think about regularly. Sure.
Well, you hit on one in my bio, and I'll just echo that because it's what launched my coaching career, which is leap and the net will appear. I came home from a particularly tough day in advertising and got a card that said that. And I walked in the next day and said, I'm resigning and I'm launching a business in a month. So that really that one landed for me. So that's one of my favorites.
Man, I need to call you, Jen, when I'm thinking, well, should I do this or this? Because you'll just say, Sonia, tomorrow. You got to do it tomorrow. Down the road future. Cool. And Pete?
So a couple of them just popped into mind because I just came back from meeting with a new client today, and who had taken a promotion and moved up. And the thing that really hit home was the idea that you no longer get paid to be right, but you get paid to be effective. And oftentimes with the clients that I have, they're super smart. They're literally the smartest person in the room when you walk in. And yet they no longer are able to solve the problems themselves. They have to engage others to help them to make that happen. And so for a person like that, it was this mantra of who, not how. And even to the point of putting a little sticky note on her computer screen to say who, not how. You don't need to figure it out. You need to figure it out with. You need to identify who can lead that. So that was one that just came up today, I guess. And also the idea of sometimes you can think your way to a new way of acting, and sometimes you have to act your way to a new way of thinking.
Yeah, say more about that.
So sometimes you can process and you can understand and you can say, okay, so therefore I'm going to go out and try this and see if it works. And sometimes you just have to do it and allow that to influence your thinking. So try something for a period of time and see if your thinking comes around, rather than battling a lot of those deeper iceberg beliefs and trying to change those in a way that have made you successful to this point. So I don't know. Those pop into my head today.
Yeah, but specifically you're saying a lot of people battle motivation. Am I motivated to? Am I stuck? And you're saying, why ask that? Try it.
Try it.
Yeah.
Try it. Yeah. Because we can stop ourselves with the idea of what's going to happen as a result. And you don't really know. So experiment, try it and see if it really turns out that way, or if maybe it turns out well.
Yeah.
There's a couple.
Jen, another phrase or mantra that runs through your head?
The line that I landed on for my coaching practice is the silver lining lies within. And that was kind of inspired by just some difficult times I've gone through, and recognizing that if I could find a silver lining in some of the worst experiences I've been through, grief and loss and things like that, then anything could happen. And just, it reminds me a little bit in the context of what we're talking about, what Pete just said. At the end of the day, to create change, you have to find that motivation within yourself. Why does it matter? And so that idea that, if you can find that silver lining within you, you can really do anything from there.
Yeah. Yeah, that also begs a lot of different questions. How do I find the silver lining? What is it? So it opens the door.
Yeah. 15 years in advertising, Sonia. You gotta have a good mind.
You're saying you have a lot of phrases that.
Yeah.
Good. Pete, back to you for ping pong if you want for another.
I'm gonna pass on this one. I don't have another one coming to me.
Like a game show.
I'm gonna let it percolate a little bit in the back. Okay.
Cool.
I'm gonna end on one that for both of us, Pete. That came up in our last certification. One of our Boulder participants shared the line. I don't know if it's a mantra, but just the idea of a path isn't formed by walking at one time. That the grass is patted down over and over, and it becomes a path because you're consistently walking it over and over. And so just recognizing that change doesn't happen, one and done, that it's continuing to nurture and nuance it is what creates the impact and the difference. So I just thought that was a nice visual way of thinking about some of the work that we do as coaches.
Yeah.
I love that. And it fed directly into a question that I really wanted to ask you, which I'll go next. You said one of our Boulder participants laid this out and said this. Let me ask you a little bit about bravery. You've both been in the corporate environment, whether in it or coaching people in it for a long time. What is something that you yourself have taken as an action that's been brave? And either of you could start, whichever you prefer.
I can go. So for me, it was 2007 when I had been in corporate life for 17 years at one particular organization, was their executive leader in HR. And it's a really good organization. Has a powerful mission, a nonprofit healthcare organization. And I knew it very, very well. And at the same time, I knew that it was time to leave. And so in the midst of what became the Great Recession, going to my wife, Jenny, and talking with her and going out and then with her encouragement, launching my new business was really one of those leaps of faith that Jen talks about. And with that, with that support behind me then, and Jenny being a person with a disability and me being her main caregiver, we came into another challenge about 3 years later when the business was doing pretty well. And I had found then my interest in positive psychology. I'd taken a short course from Tal Ben-Shahar on it, had been exposed to a lot of the readings when I went through the Hudson Institute to get my coaching certification, and decided this is something I'd really like to do. And so went to Jenny and said, I'd like to do this. And it would mean winding down my practice for a period of about a year or so. And she said, apply. If you get in, we'll figure it out. And that meant a ton to me, because I was going to be going to Philly for 4 days every 3 weeks. And I hadn't been apart from Jenny for more than a week in 15 years, being the person that was her primary caregiver. And so that really was a leap of faith and being brave. And more than anything, it was Jenny's being brave as well, knowing how challenging that can be. So there's my story.
It also sounds like joint bravery, which I haven't heard of as much.
I like that.
Yeah.
Joint bravery. I like that.
Coin that term, Sonia.
Okay. It's done. You heard it here first.
Ad agency.
That's right. That's
TM.
right.
Put a TM on that thing.
And Jen, your thoughts, bravery that you
well, we touched on sort of my version of Pete's example already when I changed careers, but I think what was probably for its time bolder move before that was I think in hindsight now, I knew I was falling out of love with my career in advertising, but I thought maybe I was just feeling like I just needed to change. So I uprooted myself from the East Coast and just moved to the West Coast, only knowing maybe 2 people from, college that lived there, and left every one of my entire kind of support system, family, friends, and otherwise back on the East Coast. In 2009, when the economy was terrible, and I just thought, well, something will pan out. And it did. And that led to, a couple more years in advertising, but ultimately me realizing, 3 cities and 8 different agencies, maybe it's me and not them. But I think had I not made that bold leap, and I just remember saying to my mom, I don't know what it is yet. I just kind of want to wipe the canvas clean and paint a new one. And I don't think I knew really what I was searching for. But, in the end, it wound up being, the change in career and getting into coaching. And I think I felt like I had the courage to do that from having just, kind of relocated my whole life and found a way to do so and still thrive. So.
Yeah, thank you. Especially that visual of leaving your friends behind, moving to a place where you knew 2 people total. And as an adult, it's hard to make friends as an adult.
Yeah. And you don't think that 3-hour time difference is an obstacle, but it really is a whole other time of the day. So it presented other challenges I didn't anticipate as well in terms of just connecting and staying in touch. Yeah.
Thank you both. Okay. Shift positive 360. If there's, if people walk away at the end of this hour and there's something that they should take with them. So even as a preamble, before we do a deep dive, what is something that now that you can tell people, I hope they hear this. I hope this is a message that comes across. Either one of you to go first. Let's just, so you're not both stepping in. Let's go, Pete.
Okay. So I would say that if something isn't working, question the system that's keeping it going the way in which it is. Trust your gut a bit. Pay attention to some of those signs that are coming forward. And that's what led us to look at feedback. I mean, feedback is broken. And it's not because of bad intention. People design feedback systems, 9-box systems, performance reviews, 360 feedback, because we want people to learn and grow and be their best selves. And yet that's not how they end up getting used. Instead, people feel beat up by them. People feel like they're drive-bys. People feel like there's vendettas, that sort of thing. And so it's not because of intention. It's because of design flaws, is our belief. And that's what we've tried to then change. So question the assumptions, change them in order to improve the system and improve the outcome. And pay attention to those indicators that you're getting of, this just doesn't feel right. And that's what we experienced in doing 360s. And that's why we took that on.
Yeah, and hopefully everybody, go ahead.
I'm almost hearing that as a theme beside it, aligned with the things that you said are the brave actions that you've taken. Just things were not feeling right. Something, You
Mhm.
changed your systems, but now you're saying, how can corporations change the things that aren't working?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Jen.
I was just going to say, hopefully everyone does hang on for the full hour, but to,
we don't usually have a drop off of Fisher.
yeah, but in case you don't, just building on what Pete said, you know, we really think that we've landed on something that's completely unique. Not that it's you know, unfathomable, but we've put together a couple core components that we know now after, you know, 7 years of using it, that really helps to drive sustainable change for organizations. And we continue to be told by our participants, like, this is not a 360, this is like a model for change in an organization, which feels amazing to hear. And we believe that too, but right now we're just talking about it through the lens of a 360. So yeah, I mean, really looking at, which we're going to dive into, but positive psychology and system support, and that combination of the two and how that can change the feedback experience has been really compelling. And I think we've found some surprises along the way and have been reassured even from where we were 2 years ago, feeling brave that we had something, but then since then, how that's been solidified by the feedback we've gotten has been pretty remarkable. So going with the instinct and the insights that Pete set up in terms of, if something's broken, look at the system, and then solving for it has been an incredible journey for us.
I want to echo that. So this is my participation guide for when I went through the Shift Positive certification with you two. And I want to echo that. It is a system. It's called Shift Positive 360. It's a system for feedback. But what we labeled this webinar is creating lasting change in an organization. It's interesting that it's this area or this niche of 360s, but it really does affect other things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually teaching people dialogue skills guised as 360s, guised as feedback.
Say more. I haven't heard you say that even in the training.
So dialogue, the ability, if we know how to talk with each other, if we know how to do it in a constructive fashion, we don't need feedback systems. We don't need performance reviews and 360 systems. And so all we're doing is being an intervener on behalf of our client to help the people that are around them say things that are beneficial to the client and beneficial to themselves. So it's not about gathering feedback on a client. It's instead about being willing to step into that space and help people figure out, how can I do this well, so that when we leave, they continue to do that well.
Pete, this isn't something I had thought that I would be asking you, but you're just leading me to it with this. Yeah. Dialogue skills. What, for the people on the call, what is a dialogue skill that you can tell us about so that we can even walk away and say, oh, I can practice this dialogue skill?
Sure. So one that we teach in the training is actually about, we use a little T-chart exercise. And we're so quick to see what's not working. We're very, very tuned in because of the negativity bias at seeing something that's broken, something we don't appreciate about somebody, something that actually literally threatens us in some way and has a reaction inside us. But we need to go further. And the skill is, what do you want instead? So you don't just want that to stop. What do you want the person to be doing instead? And to be able to engage with yourself, to breathe, to think through, well, what would it look like? What would I want if they were even more effective, or what would I rather see them doing? That's a skill. It's rather than just a reaction. That's being able to respond. And that's a dialogue skill that we teach coaches to teach people that they're interviewing. And hopefully then, even in that 1 hour that they spend with each interviewee, that person starts to reframe themselves over and over and over again through the methodology, so that they learn just a little bit about, okay, this is bugging me, but I'm not going to say that. I'm going to do some work and think about what it would look like instead if they were even more effective, or we were more effective together.
So you're challenging people. You're saying to people, work a little more, think a little harder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you see their eyes roll back a bit and you see them look up in the air, then you know you're doing good work.
My theater teacher used to say that's what people do when they forget a line.
Yeah, because they don't know.
They go back in their head. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And they have to go back there and see it on the ceiling and bring it back and then be able to recognize it. So,
and work a little more. It's not that I don't like this, but here's the specific thing I want instead.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a clear dialogue skill. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, we don't need a lot of skill to go out and gather all the things that suck about our client.
We can hang out at the playground. That's easy. We hear that. Yeah, Jen.
And I was just going to echo the piece of what does it look like, I think is the piece, and when we think about dialogue skills and just remembering that question or encouraging somebody to envision it themselves, because, I just did an interactive and a speaking engagement last week where I did an interactive audience participation where everyone did a T-chart, and then I asked one person to share, and in the left column, somebody, misses deadlines, doesn't seem motivated, this and that. And then on the right side, so it was be proactive, show the team you want to get to the next level. But I said, well, what does proactive look like? What if that person is being more, because that's still like they were trying to be specific, but that's still pretty broad. So I said, how will you know if they're being proactive? And so it became really about timeliness and that they're not getting meeting notes out within 24 hours as they've been asked. Like they're not debriefing with the team after meetings, the key people that needed to know what happened, et cetera. And so that became very different than proactive. So then when I asked afterwards, like, how much better do you think this person's going to be able to do with your ability to now articulate these specific things? And they felt much more encouraged in their ability to give the feedback because they could actually give some specifics that would set them up for success with the feedback. Yes. So really asking the questions that help you get to the level of specificity necessary for the person to really have a chance at creating that change.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to tell something to our audience. You can start to type in your questions to either the chat box or to the Q&A section, and we will get to them in 15 and 14 minutes, but just so you know, you can start typing them in. Okay, tell us, what is the Shift Positive 360?
Go.
So the Shift Positive, it is, as you said earlier, it's a narrative 360 tool. So many coaches have their questions that they go out and they ask when they're doing a 360, interviewing stakeholders around the client, trying to find out what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, what should they work on, that sort of thing from that person's perspective. It's similar in that it is a narrative 360 like that, where you're interviewing the stakeholders around a client. However, it's different in a couple of ways. One, the questions are very well thought out and come from the field of positive psychology. And that includes things like solution-focused coaching, appreciative inquiry, understanding strengths, and even questions around energy and how energizing that leader is. And then the second thing that's unique about it, beyond the questions, is just the social support. It's going back to that idea that the coach's role is not to gather information, but the coach's role is actually to garner allies, to gather people around that individual that are willing to be part of that person's development and change, that are each willing to do at least one thing differently to support that person. And so to make that happen, we have to change a lot of the underlying assumptions that normal 360s include. But it's not just about gathering feedback. Instead, it's about engaging that human system to support our client.
Yeah, could you, for example, let's switch over to Jen. Jen, can you tell us a little more about allies? Pete mentioned allies. What are allies? If let's say my client is Joe, and Joe's manager is Mary, and then I'm interviewing Mary and some peers and some directs. What's an ally in this system?
Yeah, so I mean, ideally, we call allies also the people system. I think you might have mentioned that term earlier. And it's the people around the leader that are going to be responsible for helping him or her to change. And how they're going to be responsible is, like as Pete said, they're going to be naming one thing that they can do differently or that they can commit to. And they're also going to be primed and ready to notice the changes and the type of feedback that they had given when it starts to happen. Because part of the design flaws that we referenced earlier is oftentimes feedback's given and then it's rarely tracked or followed up on and rarely called out when it actually starts to happen. It's not often reinforced. And so through what we were just talking about a moment ago in terms of getting to that level of specificity, why that's important is because unless they're able to name the behaviors that they want to see, it's unlikely they will notice them when they start to happen. And so garnering these allies throughout the entire interview really is helping to get them so clear on what the feedback is, so then they can go and look for it, which is ultimately going to set your client up for success by them being able to have that opportunity from 2, 4, 6, or 8 people around them being able to reinforce what they're seeing as they're seeing it. And to also then do whatever the one thing is they suggested, the person that, dominates meetings, maybe the manager, was it Joe or Mary?
The manager, let's call the manager Mary and the client
The
Joe.
manager was Mary. So maybe Mary's in a lot of meetings with Joe and says, maybe Joe, I'll say, hey, Joe, do you have questions for the group if I sense that you're dominating too much? Because, Joe is not going to mean to dominate, but he might fall back into his old ways. That's his natural place of being, to be the talker, to give a lot of his thoughts. But if she's wanting to see him pull more from the group, how can she cue that up for him? How can she support that? So then Mary becomes an ally, because she's really there advocating with him and for him with that, for that change to happen.
So let's say I've been coaching Joe, and let's say I have a certain number of months of engagement with him. And at the beginning, I will have done this Shift Positive 360 method. How do we know? How can Joe and I check afterwards? Okay, things are Joe is making progress.
Yeah. You want to talk about what we have underway?
Sure. I'll mention that. I wanted to pick up on what you said, because I think in what you said, Jen, there was something that was really powerful, which is, remember, the coach is only interacting with the client 1% of the time, 5% of the time. They're surrounded by people every day. 95, 99% of the time is away from the coach. And so how are they going to be reinforced in those new behaviors? And so when you've got Mary and Joe working together, that keeps it going. Another way in which you can see if it's continuing is every person that is interviewed identifies at least one thing that they're willing to do differently to support the client. And that not only is part of the interview process, but it goes into the development plan for your client. That person's name and what they're willing to help with. And so as a coach, then you can come back and you can say, how is it, Joe, how's it going with Mary? Mary, how's it going with Joe? Depending upon who you're coaching there. And go down the line of those allies and find out what's working, what's not, what are they seeing in you? What comments are you getting back from them? So you're getting feedback along the way as coach. And then we also, right now, have in development, actually another Mapster. Jill is helping us with this. And it is designing a survey that the coach will be able to send out to all of the participants, or the client can send out to the participants. And it's basically asking, did the client share with you what their goals were? How much change did you see in their behavior in those goal areas? Also, for the one thing that you volunteered to help them with, how actively did you help? With the idea that the more the client shares what they're working on and the more other people are actually stepping up, the more perceived change we'll see in the client themselves. And then it goes on to say, now what can you continue to do? And what would you like the client to continue to do? How will you support them? How will you support that client in that? So we'll have some very good data that we hope to do research on to be able to prove that this idea of engaging that human system really pays off.
Yeah, we're super excited about this. So we're rolling it out. Hopefully, this is our next call where we're getting our timeline, but we hope this summer we'll be able to offer this up to anyone that's been certified, and then certainly anyone that comes through moving forward as a good follow-up tool. And it'll be very turnkey, electronic, easy for you to go in and set up a custom link for your client's people system to answer the survey.
Yeah, that's impactful what you two are saying, especially the specific, in a sense, statistic, Pete, that you're saying about 95% of the time, that person is interacting with the people that you've interviewed. We pretty much interact with that small circle at work. And sometimes we're external facing, or we have other people cross-function, but we have a group of people that we work with all the time. Yeah. How can they keep us moving forward?
Yeah. So how do we leverage? I often say this process like really galvanizes or re-galvanizes the system to make sure that everyone really is operating as one. Yeah. How are they looking out for one another and each individual goal and vision for success?
Yeah.
So there's a lot more that you can do in that 1 hour or 45 minutes with each interviewee to help your client by spending that hour well with the stakeholder.
Yeah. And an announcement to the people who are watching. We're going to turn to your questions in just over 5 minutes. Some of the kinds of questions that you can ask are, if I'm having this kind of situation, whether I'm a coach or I'm at work, you can get a little bit of personal coaching from Jen and Pete. So feel free to make the questions either about you or your situation or a client you're working with. We won't say your name when we're reading off the questions. Or feel free to make it about the instrument itself, the Shift Positive, or about the theory of the Shift Positive, this people system and the positive psychology and the solution focus. So you have a few areas you can go in specific to yourself or a client, about the instrument, the theory behind the instrument. So we're open to that, and we'll turn to you in 5 minutes. Okay, I want to ask about something that I would say not even surprised me, but shocked me when I was in your 2-day training workshop. Anonymity. For a decade, I've been doing 360s where I'm interviewing, let's say 6 to 10 people, and I gather that information and I keep it anonymous and I pull out the big themes and share it with the clients. You turned that on its head, and I was very resistant. I had a lot of what's going on while I was sitting there in your training. So tell me, what do you recommend? What is the Shift Positive approach to anonymity and why?
Sure. So here's our belief about anonymity, confidentiality. Confidentiality is a symptom of a broken system. We don't know how to say something constructively, we say it confidentially. And so we want to change that. We teach people how to garner constructive feedback, and we teach then the people that we're interviewing how to give constructive feedback. One of the things that people expect is that when you ask about strengths, the next question you're going to ask is about weaknesses. But we never ask about weaknesses because we frankly don't care about people's weaknesses. It's not that they're not interesting, informational, insightful. It's just that they're insufficient for change. You can't change just knowing what's broken. You have to instead envision what it is that you want to move toward. And so that's one of the main reasons why people want confidentiality, because they don't want to share a weakness and then feel bad. Instead, if we take away that fear, if we take away that idea that you're going to be asked a weakness and instead say, what would you want? What would it look like? Then it's not hard to share that and allow that person to know that it came from you. Because what it does then is it offers context. If one person says you're a great communicator and another person says you suck at communicating, what do you put down in a survey? They're an average communicator? Context matters. But if one person says you're great in working with the team, and what I'd love to see you do in working with the executive team is this, now you've got context and there's no need for it to be confidential. And you can also trust the intent a little bit more behind that, because you're gaining from the interviewer what the tone was, how it came across, what the person's intent was. And so the reasons for, and that's why we said earlier, question the assumptions. The assumption that it has to be confidential is one of those that we looked at and we said, why? Why would you want it confidential? Well, why don't we take away the reason why somebody would want it to be confidential?
That fear, you're saying that fear of feeling bad or saying something mean about my colleague.
Yeah. And what's really great, and it's working, is by the end of the interview, people say, wow, this felt different. And I don't care if he or she knows that I said it, because I feel like I gave really great ideas for ways that they could be better, or things they're already doing that are awesome. So they actually feel like excited and energized and quite proud of the level of feedback they were able to provide, and in which case, not worried at all about whether or not if the person figures out their answer.
Yeah.
Because we do want to tell people, we do want to give people feedback. We just don't know how to do it very well. So if we help them to do it well, they're fine with it being identified as coming from them.
It keeps reminding me of what Jen said earlier. If I get feedback of you're not proactive enough, I don't know what to do. But if I get told, please reply to send out the notes from a meeting within 24 hours, I can do that. I know if I've done that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's do a rapid fire round in the next 2 minutes before we turn it over to the questions, which are open already and which I will ask you in a moment. Okay, rapid fire for each of them. Let's go Pete and then Jen, Pete and Jen. First question, if we take one thing away from today's call, what should it be, Pete?
Question assumptions, improve systems. You can make things better.
Jen.
I'm just going to go direct here. If you're interested in what we're saying and you really want to help galvanize your client and their system and really help set them up for success, check out what we're doing. Learn more. We'll tell you how to at the end. But shiftpositive360.com, and we'd love to speak with you more about it, even beyond today's call.
As a quick detail to that, before we get back to our rapid fire, you have a Portland training coming up in June and a Philly one in October. Is that right?
Yeah, June 7th and 8th in downtown Portland. We have a fantastic space that promises to be amazing food, which is some of the details that we care a lot about in addition to our methodology.
Is that a winery? Yeah.
I was really surprised. I've gone to other trainings, but I went to yours and it felt like a resort. It felt so nice. It felt like I really want to spend time with all the other people in the room and hang out there and be. You do care.
Thank you. One of my other mantras is a brand is the promise of an experience. And so if we can't provide a great experience, then how do we expect you to trust what we're training you in? So yeah, June 7th and 8th registration does, and May 17th, which is 3 weeks prior, because there is a little bit of pre-work, which is a really fun thing to be a part of. So yeah, check us out soon if that's of interest to you. And then October 23rd and 24th?
Or 24th,
24th and 25th.
Yeah, 24th and 25th, just before the MAP Summit. We'll be in Philadelphia.
Getting back to our rapid fire.
Yes.
If we, the people listening to this webinar, if we do one thing every day, what should it be? Pete.
If we do one thing every day, what should it be? I encourage you to breathe every day.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Spoken like a true fish hatchery. And Jen.
I'm going to go a little bit more connected to the work, but what popped into my head was just the incredible gift it is to really mirror back to somebody one of their strengths. That's something that we're all too willing to discount about ourselves, and to understand the value of how one of your strengths really impacts somebody else, I think is an incredible thing to know. So if there's a little nugget you can share with somebody every day about something that they do really well, I think that's a great gift to give.
Still going on rapid fire. What do you most want us to believe after today's webinar, Pete?
That you can make a difference. That you can look at what's happening. You can see where something doesn't seem to be right, and you can step in. And whether it's 360s, a performance review, whether it's just simply how you talk to your kids or somebody important in your life, you can change and become more constructive in how you hold those dialogues.
Jen,
I was going to say just that feedback doesn't have to suck. The experience doesn't have to be painful and shaming. That truly, I've got a client that tells me she reads her 360 every night before she goes to bed. I mean, I've never heard of anyone that wants to read a feedback report twice, let alone like as a pick-me-up before they go to sleep. So
what a cool thing. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it can be different.
Okay, a couple more questions. Pete, how do you most want us to feel after this webinar?
Hopeful, optimistic, powerful.
Jen.
Energized.
Pete, how do you most want us to be as a person?
I like it when people are warm, when they are present, when they are caring.
Jen.
Look for what positive. I mean, like look for what's working. Flip the switch and not always what's wrong, but what's right about a person, a situation, the day.
And last question, which was a little bit my first question in this rapid fire, which is what one action do you want us to take after this webinar?
I'm going with sign up for Portland.
Great. Jen?
Yeah, I'll double that. We still have some room. We're super jazzed about this opportunity and the types of people that are on this call, and we'd love to have you just up the ante with our participants that are already signed up and contribute at a high level, and to learn more and to be able to use this tool.
Beautiful. And as we're turning over, I'm about to start reading the audience questions. Just letting you know that for all the people who are watching or have registered, or if you email me or Catherine, we will send you a coupon that is useful through this Friday. I emailed Jen and Pete and said, do you want to offer something like $100 off to the people watching? And they said, no, we'll do $250 off. So it's $250 off if you are watching this now and get our email, or else email us. Okay, turning over to the questions. How do you help those allies that you mentioned? How do you help those allies, whoa, things just changed on my screen. How do you help those allies learn the preferred or the positive behaviors that you want from the person rather than the current problem behavior?
Sure. I can take that. I think Jen just demonstrated that a little bit when she was talking about her T-chart exercise, and just continuing to ask probing questions. Well, what would it look like? What would you see instead? What would be the smallest indicator that they're moving in that direction? Or when has the problem not been a problem? When have they shown behaviors that you think are really effective in that particular area? So it's getting really good at continuing to drill into it.
Yeah, all those questions. And then also just use yourself as the gauge. If you had to turn around and tell your client they want you to be more proactive, and she says, how? What does that mean? Would you know? Would you know how to explain that on behalf of the feedback? So you really holding yourself as the litmus test when you're gathering the feedback of, is this clear in your mind's eye as their coach, to be able to help them understand what those behaviors are that they're looking for? And if not, then how are you using the questions Pete just said to get that clarity? And it may be because the other person's not clear yet. My person wasn't in the meeting until I asked those questions. So just probing and not letting them off the hook until they really paint a picture that's clear enough for your client to be able to succeed.
Making them do the work, that thinking.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's often the reaction. Like, it takes a little bit more time, but in the end, that's what will help set up the change they're seeking. So
I know that one of the questions that you ask at the end is, how was this experience for you? I've just interviewed you about Joe. What was this experience like? What are some of the things you tend to hear?
This is not what I expected. This is different than any that I've ever taken or that I've ever been involved with. And even the point, and this is why I ended up sharing it with others. How did she get one of these? How did he get one of these? How can I get one of these? And I found that it impacted my business. I was garnering more clients from the interviewees around my client.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
One person who's asking a question wants to know a little bit more about what the certification is like. They're asking, if I pay and attend the certification, what do I get? What am I trained in? What kinds of fees are there afterwards? What can I use? What is the system like? What is the experience?
Sure. I can take that one. So it's a 2-day training, full day, about like 8 to 5, 8 to 4:30, I think, on the second day. And the first day is largely centered around the model. And so the research and all the substantiation behind each individual question, we break that down into modules, and we train you the background, the theory, the research behind why that question is what it is, why it falls where it falls in the interview. There's a lot of applied learning. You're role playing, practicing, breaking into pairs. We're doing group exercises like that T-chart. So by the end of day one, you're very clear on the questions and why they are what they are, and how to best get the type of answers you need, like we just illustrated with this last example that Pete gave. Like, what are the probes? How do you make sure you've gotten enough? The second day takes a careful look at the methodology and how do you run the whole process, kind of A to Z. So everything from how do you identify who's best to interview? How do you have that conversation with your client? Tools and strategies for the actual interview itself. You'll go through a whole interview with a partner in the training. So you'll get to experience, where at day one, you'll experience it in smaller chunks, question by question. And day two, you'll run through the whole thing. And then how do you debrief this? This can be a different type of report for some of the things we've already queued up. And so what is the debrief process like? We role play for you and show you some techniques that we like to use. You'll practice that. And then we talk about how to make that transition from the insights from the debrief into a development plan and some action items. So how does this start to become usable, and what does that look like? And finally, what are the ways that you can continue to initiate and engage this people system around your client throughout the process? The interview ideally is the first step, but you've explained to them now maybe a couple times leading up to the interview and the process of setting up the interview, et cetera. And then certainly in the interview itself through the questions, and by the end of the interview, that the expectation is that they continue to look for these changes, that they are there to support, your client in this change and to reinforce it. And so we give you lots of ways, including the survey we mentioned, to think about how to keep that people system kind of alive and well on behalf of your client, because ultimately as the coach, you will exit. And so how are you making sure that you've set your client up with that level of support? So that's kind of at a high level, sort of, the 2 days of the content. And I think there was a couple other.
Yeah, we want
about fees. What kind of fees will they have after they attend the certification and just pay for the certification?
Sure. Yeah. So right now it's $2,500, and we're offering anyone that signs up by Friday $250 off. So $2,250, and that's it. We arm you with that book that Senya just held up. That's phone book style. And a thumb drive, which we're in the process of transitioning over to a Dropbox, so it's even easier. But with every possible template that you'll ever need, we give you to administer the Shift Positive. We give you audio files of Pete and I asking some of the questions, so you can get a glimpse at how might that go. challenging ones, easy ones, how to set up the interview the first couple times you're doing it. We've got examples of that. We give you marketing things. We help you figure out how to sell it through in your business. We talk pricing and marketing, and we help you practice your pitch in the day 2 of the training too. How are you going to go out and sell this in your business? So all of that is included in the price of the certification, in addition to a follow-up one-on-one with either Pete or I. Once you get going and you have more individualized questions about your journey, there's a complimentary call with either one of us. You also get included into our private Google Plus group with our other 60 plus certified coaches. And moving forward, the only other, when we're just in the process of finalizing this, it will look like there'll be a small fee attached to this survey. So if that's a tool that you want to continue to use, each time you request a custom link, it'll either be a pay-as-you-go, or if you start doing a ton of them, you can get an annual membership to just have as many links as you need, because there is some upkeep on our end to kind of keep that going and make that a seamless process for you. But our Boulder group just said to us, like, tenfold, do you guys realize how generous you are? You are giving us everything we could ever possibly need to do this tomorrow. And that made us feel really good, because that's our goal. We want to have you have a completely immersive experience and leave feeling ready to start doing this.
Yeah.
And just for our audience, there is no fee after the training. I was also surprised by that. I mean, I can go out and do these questions and these interviews at any point. I'm done. I'm trained, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the only possible thing that will come up is that survey. But yeah, exactly. You don't pay per use. You can do it countless times in a year, at the same, just for year over year, just for the price of the certification. Yeah.
Yeah. And the survey that Jen's talking about that would have a charge associated with it is the one that is the feedback from the human system later on to see how much progress has been made. So a progress survey.
Follow-up survey. Yeah.
We're looking for a great name for that, actually.
Yes.
This is, Jen was talking about those individuals that are doing it as external coaches in their own practice. When we go into an organization, because we have had organizations that want to change the entire culture of feedback and believe this is the tool that's going to help them to do that. There, when we go in and we train multiple people, then we also have an agreement with the company, and there's a licensing fee as to how many times that they do it in that environment. So that's a little bit different. But for the independent practitioner, the coach, it's the one-time fee of $2,500 or $2,250 with the discount, and that's it, other than the follow-up survey if they choose to use that. Yeah.
And obviously your meals are covered, the space, and then we offer a happy hour on the Thursday in between, the evening in between the two groups to kind of further network.
Fun. I mean,
we try.
Really, like you get to know your colleagues. I'm in touch with my colleagues from your training.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah.
We're about to ask a couple more questions as we round out. But before we do, I'm going to say one more thing to the viewers, which is something we do here at Positive Psychology News webinars, which is people start to type into the Q&A box. What was your takeaway? What is something you're going to use from this webinar? What is something you want to let Jen and Pete know that you got, that you learned, that you like? So we do
love feedback.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So you can start typing that in if you like, as I ask this question. So here's one question. It just jumps around a little bit here. What if one of the people you interview just can't help saying something nasty about a person? What do you do with that?
So that's not uncommon.
Okay.
People get stuck in that negativity bias. They see what they don't want. And so you slow down with them. You say, well, what is it that you want instead? You go through that kind of process that we did earlier. And sometimes you have to really challenge the person. And so it's not uncommon to say to a client, don't expect change to happen unless you're willing to be part of it. And if you can't say it in a way that you can see it in your mind's eye of what you would want that behavior to be instead, you're not going to see it even if they start showing it.
That's really deep, actually. You're not going to see it even if they start showing it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we teach is about change blindness and inattentional blindness, how we don't see what we're not looking for. And so if that person can't name it, go ahead and say, if you can't see it yourself, you're not going to see it after the interview's over. And I don't type the negative things. That's not what we put down. We put down what it is that is constructive that they can do. Might make a note that this is a tough relationship. There's really one that's going to take a bit more work here to set you up in that coaching later on. But I'm not going to type those nasty things that a person wants to say about another. Also, it doesn't come up as often. People are able to work through it usually because they know it's not confidential. I mean, we explain that up front. This will not be confidential. They will be able to figure out over the course of reading the answers who it is that said what, and we want that to be because that context is so important. The only thing we do is we take the names off the first time we're typing it so that the reader, the client, sees more of the content itself, the similarities and differences. But over time, because of how things are said, they will be able to figure out who said what. And in fact, that's what we want to have happen as it goes along.
Jen, anything to add?
No, I think he covered it.
One thing that was very impactful that both of you said in the training, which I don't think I'm giving anything away, it's just this following up on what you said, is if I'm interviewing that Mary, the manager of Joe, what can I say to Joe? What can I take back to Joe? How can I make this something that Joe can act on?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to take a pause here before the end, and I'm going to ask both Pete and Jen, what haven't I yet asked you? We brainstormed a few things before the webinar. What haven't I yet asked you that you would like me to still ask you, or that you want to ask as a closing thing? So I'll ask each of you that, and remind the audience that now is the time that you can type into the Q&A. What is the one thing you're taking away from this call? So we have that moment right now for people to do all that. Just take a pause. I'll start. I'm taking away something that this system, it's about, and the way you said it this time, Pete, was a little different than I've heard you and Jen say it before. It's about training people in how to have dialogues. That this system is about training the people that you're speaking with and the person who's your client, but just here are different ways of having that discussion. You don't need feedback meetings if you're doing this well. Yeah. I'm really taking that away. Okay, last thoughts from Jen and Pete before I read off what people are saying as their takeaways.
I wanted to share just a story because it's recent, and it was a week and a half ago. I did a debrief, or I was having the update meeting with one of my clients, her supervisor and head of HR. And as I had been doing her interviews, one of the executive team members that is a peer of her boss had said, in talking about what she could do to become even more effective, had said, well, I'd like her to be a little bit less emotional. And as the words came out of his mouth, he stopped himself. And he said, I can't believe I just said that. My wife is a professional in an organization. If she were ever described as emotional, it would set me off in defense of her. And I said, so what do you want then? And he loves her fire. She's a person that gets things done. She is the one that leads the organization through crises. And this organization is in a crisis right now, and she's leading it. And what he ended up saying was, and I wrote this down, I'll take someone who is emotional over someone who doesn't give a shit every day of the week. It shows passion. And I do not want her to not show emotion. I just want to compliment it with, I've got this, because she's got this. And I'll help her balance those two. That's what he ended up coming up with in his way of being her ally when it came to her presenting to the executive team. And that you get these gems through these interviews where people realize I'm the one that in how I perceive the other is keeping them from becoming their best. And I can change so that they can change.
And that perspective was brought on for him by thinking, whoa, if that hit close to home, someone ever said this to my wife.
Yeah.
I almost want you guys to start a set of blog posts. That's
Stories.
Just these kind of insights that people have when they're hearing themselves think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great idea, actually.
Jen.
Senya, I mean, you have lived your childhood dream in its fullest because you did a lovely job interviewing us. And I do feel like I got to say a lot of what we had hoped to cover. So thank you. And great questions from the group. I think the only other thing which I think we sprinkled a bit, but just what type of reaction and kind of feedback have we gotten? And, both from the other coaches we've certified, as well as clients who've experienced it and people that have been interviewed. Pete mentioned that he wound up, and I have the same experience, getting a lot of those interviewees as coaching clients, as a follow-up to doing the process with them. I mentioned my client that reads it before bed. Another client took her husband through it, all through their dinner, and just couldn't wait to read all the excerpts. another client was just petrified, and I really had to kind of handhold him, an executive, through the process. And in the end, he was running through the halls saying, like, this is just, everyone needs to get one of these. And, you know, this is just amazing. So just really great. And then I think Pete and I just continue to be incredibly humbled and honored at the end of each of our certification processes to have such amazing minds in a room of coaches, and to hear the level of feedback and the vision they see and the possibility they see for this approach, both within their own businesses, but even across an entire organization they work within, has not worn off yet for us. We do a savoring dinner at the end of each of our certifications, and we still continue to say how meaningful that is for us to hear people that we respect so much in the business be able to give such nice feedback. So so there's some quotes and all that good stuff on our website as well. Check those out, and we're happy to introduce you to somebody that's been certified. Of course, you have been, Senya, but if you want to talk to either one of us directly, we're also happy to always take a one-on-one call to talk more about the process or the certification.
The website is Shift Positive 360. Thank you each very much, and please stay on and listen. Here are what people are saying they are taking away.
Nice.
Challenge systems that don't work. Confidentiality, and how surprising that was to someone. That feedback is meant to help people get better. So if it isn't doing that, do it differently. That a 360 is not only a 360, that it's the start of conversations.
Nice.
And someone's commenting in response to watching you two describe how alive you are in this. They're commenting, you can have fun while doing a 360.
Yeah.
You can.
That is one of our company mantras. We said if at any point we're not having fun, then why are we doing this? So yeah.
Oh.
So a huge thank you to Jen Ostrich and Pete Berridge and their Shift Positive 360 with the website shiftpositive360.com. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Senya.
It was wonderful.